Another day, another indictment against former President Donald Trump. What is this now? 3 indictments? Good morning. Springfield's Morning News on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. Love to hear your thoughts all throughout the morning, live and local, 217-629-7970. That's the phone number here, and you can sound off about the latest indictment, which focuses on allegations of Trump's role in the January 6th riots at the Capitol and attempts to try to overthrow the election of then President-elect Joe Biden. So let's hear it, 217-629-7970. But ultimately what you have here is the latest indictment alleging criminal conspiracies, multiple criminal conspiracies connected with attempts to challenge the results of the 2020 election. Now, they say in the indictments that the president at the time, Trump, had the right to say whatever he wanted to say and claim election fraud and to challenge the results, but they charge that the former president, his actions and his conversations crossed the line into unlawful territory. Now, the president putting out statements ultimately saying that this is, election interference and saying that this is something that is damaging the country, and he's continuing to pursue his election. But let's go ahead and hear what Jack Smith, the special prosecutor, had to say yesterday whenever he brought the indictment forward, essentially alleging that the former president acted in a way that was unlawful by trying to change the election outcome of the 2020 election. And again, you can chime in on this at 217-629-7970, 217-629-7970. Here's Jack Smith, special prosecutor, alleging Trump's wrongdoing during a brief news conference yesterday.
Good evening. Today, an indictment was unsealed, charging Donald J. Trump with conspiring to defraud the United States, conspiring to disenfranchise voters, and conspiring and attempting to obstruct an official proceeding. The indictment was issued by a grand jury of citizens here in the District of Columbia, and it sets forth the crimes charged in detail. I encourage everyone to read it in full. The attack on our nation's capital on January 6, 2021, was an unprecedented assault on the seat of American democracy. As described in the indictment, it was fueled by lies. Lies by the defendant targeted at obstructing a bedrock function of the U.S. government, the nation's process of collecting, counting, and certifying the results of the presidential election. The men and women of law enforcement who defended the U.S. Capitol on January 6th are heroes. They are patriots and they are the very best of us. They did not just defend a building or the people sheltering in it. They put their lives on the line to defend who we are as a country and as a people. They defended the very institutions and principles that define the United States. Since the attack on our Capitol, the Department of Justice has remained committed to ensuring accountability for those criminally responsible for what happened that day. This case is brought consistent with that commitment, and our investigation of other individuals continues. In this case, my office will seek a speedy trial so that our evidence can be tested in court and judged by a jury of citizens. In the meantime, I must emphasize that the indictment is only an allegation and that the defendant must be presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. I would like to thank the members of the Federal Bureau of Investigation who are working on this investigation with my office, as well as the many career prosecutors and law enforcement agents from around the country who have worked on previous January 6th investigations. These women and men are public servants of the very highest order, and it is a privilege to work alongside them. Thank you.
So there you go. Jack Smith, the special prosecutor appointed by Merrick Garland at the Department of Justice, with his announcements that the former president, Donald Trump, indicted on another charge. So now he faces the Stormy Daniels situation in Manhattan. That's a state-level charge. He's charged with the classified documents case, where an interesting turn of events late last month we'll get to in a moment on that case. But now he's charged with a separate charge here concerning January 6th and attempts that prosecutors say of the former president trying to overturn an election. So there's others that, of course, you heard were being investigated in this as well as, quote, co-conspirators. They were unnamed in the indictment, but some sleuthing by members of the media indicating that that's Rudy Giuliani, John Eastman, Sidney Powell, Kenneth Chesebro, and Jeffrey Clark, a former DOJ civil attorney. So you've got these allegations against the former president, and we'll actually hear from the former president's attorney in this case. He chatted with Fox News last night and highlights how the former president could have pretty powerful authority in this case to subpoena and really relitigate the 2020 election. So what do you see here? Is this a benefit for Trump? Already putting out the fundraising emails, or do you see this as something that's going to be Trump's detriment? Because one thing that you have here also is the former vice president's role in this, Mike Pence, who's also running for president, but he didn't even make the cut for the upcoming GOP debate. Pence put out a statement saying that he thought there was no constitutional basis for such authority and that it was improper. And this was, of course, around the time that Trump asked Pence to not certify the election. But Pence says, the indictment serves as an important reminder. Anyone who puts himself over the Constitution should never be president of the United States. So Mike Pence using this as a way to try to, diminish Trump in his efforts to try to become the GOP nominee. So let's get your calls, and we'll get your calls all throughout the morning on this breaking story, huge story. Never before in history has a former president been indicted once, let alone 3 different times. Good morning. You're on WMAY.
I think it helps, and nobody believes the January 6th narrative.
I wouldn't say nobody believes it. I think there's a lot of people who believe it.
I'm going to disagree with you. Everybody I know in real life thinks it was all bogus and it's all media hype. Just like the other 2 indictments, I think this one makes him better in the polls.
And he's already well above all the other GOP contenders, and you can imagine that his diehard supporters are going to see this and continue to support him. But you think that those who have been kind of on the fence might see this as political persecution and support Trump?
I don't even think it's his diehard supporters. I think it's the general public recognizes this is bogus. This doesn't happen in America. This happens in Venezuela.
Yeah, and one thing that's interesting, I appreciate the call, is this tweet that kind of outlines some of the various types of dates when all this started popping. This is a tweet from Greg Price. He lays out these timelines of various revelations and then indictments. Let's pull this up for those watching online. You can see here, he says, June 7th, FBI releases documents to Congress alleging that Biden's took $10 million in bribes from Burisma. And then June 8th, the next day, Jack Smith indicts Trump in Mar-a-Lago docs case. July 26th, Hunter Biden goes to court and rejects sweetheart plea deal after it was revealed DOJ tried to give him blanket immunity from future prosecutions. The next day, July 27th, Jack Smith adds more charges for Trump in the Mar-a-Lago case. July 31st, Hunter Biden's former business partner testifies to Congress that Joe Biden was on the phone over 20 times with his son's business partners and that Burisma execs pressured them to fire the prosecutor. And then the next day, Jack Smith indicts Trump again for January 6th. So an interesting timeline there. Again, would love your thoughts. 217-629-7970. We'll get to more. Taking your calls in reaction to former President Donald Trump being indicted for a third time. Good morning. Springfield's Morning News on 92.7 WMAY, Springfield's News and Talk. You can always call in live and local at 217-629-7970, or you can email me, bishoponair@gmail.com. Or if you're following along on Facebook or on YouTube, you can message us that way. Some of the comments from YouTube so far this morning, looks like the election cycle will be covered from the courtrooms. That's an interesting comment. I long for the days of Russia collusion. Remember those days? Interesting. Hypnolama says this likely will be the catalyst for a civil war. All this is going down right as the Hunter Biden business associates are implicating Joe himself. This reeks of distraction and corruption. Another commenter says, or the two impeachments, or the New York Stormy Daniels thing, or the Mar-a-Lago secret papers. All this is BS, that commenter says. You also have others talking about, one in particular says, Greg, hope you realize that, let me get to it here. Here it is. If you haven't realized that the globalists are controlling the narrative. UFO distractions, Trump distractions, Biden distractions. Meanwhile, World War III starting. The best thing to do at this point is find God and help teenagers because they're the ones that are going to be drafted soon. So those are just some of the comments from the audience on YouTube. Love to hear your thoughts, 217-629-7970. So again, former President Trump indicted for a third time, the second federal indictment on separate issues. One deals with classified documents. This one released yesterday deals with allegations he attempted to overthrow the election. And what's fascinating here is apparently they have to prove that he knew he lost the election and that he made the steps he made because he knew he lost the election, was trying to fraudulently overturn the election. So it'll be interesting to see if, they are able to prove that. Of course, the jurisdiction of this matters, being in Washington, D.C., but you also have the prospect of if he gets a conviction, he'll head on to an appeals court and likely all the way to the U.S. Supreme Court. But how all this plays out leading into the 2024 election, that's a big question. And one thing that the former president, Trump, has indicated, he says this is election interference. So fascinating to watch all this continue to transpire, what times we live in, absolute history being made. But John Lauro, he is Trump's attorney. He was on with Sean Hannity last night, and he laid out how this trial forthcoming for these charges could actually give Trump some ammunition in highlighting all that was wrong with the 2020 election. Here's how that played out last night.
Thing I will say, though, in 2020, Mr. Trump's campaign had a few weeks to gear up and present evidence, and it was very difficult. We now have the ability in this case to issue our own subpoenas, and we will relitigate every single issue in the 2020 election in the context of this litigation. It gives President Trump an opportunity that he has never had before, which is to have subpoena power since January 6th in a way that can be exercised in federal court.
What you're talking we'll see how that plays out. And somebody commenting on YouTube that looks like the 2024 election will actually have to be covered from courtrooms. We'll be talking a lot more about this a little bit later on, so I want to get your reaction at 217-629-7970. All right? So stay tuned. We'll cover this some more in the next